Oh, right. And we are at it again. Hey, everyone. So, I've got a great discussion lined up today. And who am I meeting with? I'm meeting with Lieutenant Colonel retired, even though he doesn't consider himself very much so retired, Miles Townsend. And I hope that you enjoy today's discussion. It's in regards to leadership. Again, it's a means of communication that Mr. Townsend has perfected, and he's going to talk to us about it. So I hope you enjoy today's discussion. And without further ado, and I know I've kind of introduced him quickly, but he's going to talk to us about who he is and what he's all about. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Miles Townsend. How you doing, sir?
Great, Otis. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity and to be here with you today. And thanks for the ask. Um, and I don't know that I would necessarily say that um, leadership has been. I've perfected leadership. I don't think that that's the case. I think leadership is much like everything else that we as humans undertake, and that
Mm-hmm.
is, it requires constant um, nurturing, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that we're learning and doing beings. So
Mm.
um, we're always going to, you know, we do get set in our ways certainly,
Mm-hmm.
but I think there's always opportunities to learn, improve, and certainly grow.
I got you.
So,
I got you.
but
I
I
got you.
appreciate that nonetheless. It's quite a vote of confidence. Um, a little about myself. So
Mm-hmm.
just real briefly, uh, I quote unquote finished up 27 years in the United States Army.
Mm-hmm.
Um, wonderful experience. Couldn't have asked for a better opportunity. Certainly based on the people that I had the opportunity to be led by and
Mm-hmm.
to lead and work side by side, both um, in peace and in combat operations.
Mm-hmm.
And so um, did a lot of primarily logistics over all those years.
Mm-hmm.
Really looked at that as more a, much of what we all do is problem solve, and so sought out opportunities to solve those problems and manage those programs that exist within inside the military.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I finished up my career, I looked to do essentially the same things, and primarily for the same sets of customers. And in this case, it was um, special operations. And so the airborne special operations community has been exceptionally kind to me. And so I have been afforded the opportunity to continue to work in that community as a contractor for currently Booz Allen Hamilton. And it's been a wonderful experience.
Okay.
And
And
so that brings us up to today.
I know you don't see my face, but we're having a little bit of a camera issue, but you could still hear my voice. So I'm going to allow you to be the man on the screen during the entirety of of our discussion, if you don't mind.
Well, no problem here. It may harm your overall viewership. So I can't take any, I can't help you there. So no problem.
Do you hear me? Okay, good. I know we wanted to shape our discussion today around the theme of the actual discussion that you offered to us. It's the speed. What did you? Why did you choose that title as far as the discussion?
So Otis, um, so I mentioned earlier, I've had the opportunity to work with some really amazing leaders over the years, and
Mm-hmm.
what I've pulled from those leaders, and quite frankly, there's, a lot of people say there's nothing new under the sun, and many of these things that I wrote down are concepts that I wanted not only from my leaders, but I wanted to share upon those with whom I would have the opportunity to lead as well,
Mm-hmm.
because I saw the effects of those. And so, um, the greatest form of flattery is the
And
opportunity to uh, mimic that same behavior. So those things that were successful, I glommed onto, and in particular, trust. Trust is huge because
mm-hmm.
if and trust is, quite frankly, I think most people would uh, agree that it's a two-way street.
Mm-hmm.
If if I don't uh, give trust um, to subordinates, peers, uh, then they're not inclined to support me in it's essentially showing value or confidence in their ability. Excuse me. And so I think trust is the absolute foundation of successful leadership, regardless of whether it's in the military or in a civil sector and private, nonprofit, whatever the case may be. There has to be a foundation of trust.
I got
Um,
you.
Otherwise, you're not going to advance. You're not going to grow um, in your relationships. Your business isn't going to grow precipitously either. Um, you know, Customers and society writ large aren't going to be accepting. So and that's why I started off with the speed of trust, because without that trust, um, it's difficult to go forward. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't feel that you can make mistakes,
Yes.
um, because quite frankly, that's how we learn.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody says, well, you've got to be absolutely perfect in how you, um, as you move forward. When you take on a task, when you take on anything, um, you've got to be able to underwrite those honest mistakes that people are going to make, and that obviously you're going to make as well. And that's, like I said, that's how you learn. And being able to coach and or mentor someone through that mistake process is how you're going to ultimately be successful.
And
It's a shared experience.
I understand that, being willing, working in an environment where mistakes are allowable, well, I shouldn't say allowable, are allowed, it sounds ideal. It sounds like the type of thing that, I want to be at that place where I can make a mistake and be allowed to, go through that learning process. But oftentimes, many of us aren't even allowed that opportunity, either in the civilian side or the military side. How do you get
Yeah.
past that sort of environment where you're almost walking on eggshells? Does it have to come from the top down? How does that work?
Hmm. That's a really good question, and I think the environment is created, and that environment is going to be um, the top certainly does have an influence. Now,
Mm-hmm.
each of us has our own ability to shape our sphere of influence, if you will. So, just because I'm not the CEO doesn't mean that I can't influence and or shape in and around my immediate coworkers and or the teams that I'm involved with, because those are all key components of creating an environment.
Mm-hmm.
Some would call it a safe space or whatever, um, but unless you're authentic with those around you, with whom you work, the ability to achieve trust, the ability to have that environment where mistakes can be made. Now, I mean, look, none of us started out, none of us is perfect, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
So mistakes are going to be made, and the severity of those mistakes certainly plays a factor, but that's training and education come into play there.
Understood. So let's talk a little bit about some of these leadership expectations that you spoke on, especially during our conversation. I am sure in your military time, you came in with a certain expectation of that you had upon yourself. So where did you get that shape and form of expectations that you had on yourself? And were you harder on yourself than say anyone else could be on you?
Well, to answer that last piece, am I harder on myself than anybody else? I think that's probably true, and I think there are many that would echo that same type of sentiment. For me, I picked up a lot of leadership as I was growing up through involvement in sports. Certainly through my family, my parents. My father was in the military. My mother's very strong Christian woman. And so that all built the foundation for me. And so the involvement in sports over the years, up through high school, and then ROTC in college, and working with those instructors, all of those are inputs, and certainly teachers throughout the years. So those are all factors that weighed in on many of the leadership tenets, if you will, that I talked about and mentioned in our discussion. Because teamwork, team play. It's great to have competition amongst your peers, but in the same token, it's got to be helpful, and it's also going to be positive.
Yeah.
Many of us have probably had those competitive environments where it was utterly ruthless. It advances the whole narrative for the team, and makes the company potentially better. But how positive experience is it? I've competed in both of those environments, and as I gained more and more experience, the helpful and the positive aspects, that was the environment that I attempted to create as often as possible. Whether it would be completely successful or not, or if it would take hold, it was worth the effort. It was worth the time, rather than a negative environment where the competition was, cutthroat. And again, that was trust. If you could trust your peers or subordinates, that's a big deal. And quite frankly, your superiors, your seniors.
Gotcha.
So that was huge.
So let's talk a little bit about being a team player. And, being a team player, especially in any type of line of work, especially military, it's absolutely a necessity. But, sometimes some of us may not necessarily want to be that team player because we see, as you just mentioned prior, even being a team player, you're in a highly hyper-competitive work environment, and some people may just walk all over you and not allow you to make those mistakes, or not allow you to have the opportunity to grow and nurture yourself. How does one break past, especially if they come from a negative prior environment, how does one break past the apprehension about being a team player?
Well, another great question, Otis. And it's not simple because when you're in that environment, you essentially have scar tissue, whether it's physical or emotional scars from those types of engagements. And we've all had them. I certainly have myself. Again, it does go back to trust. Um, some people are going to recover from that. You know, you've still got to put yourself out there.
Mm-hmm.
You've still got to step into the breach, if you will, go back to those individuals and, essentially try to show them with kindness. If you're going through a new environment, try to reestablish a baseline of positive, helpful influence that sphere, those people most immediate to you and or on the team, in an effort to change that. I mean, or if you find yourself in that environment, I think you've really got to ask yourself some hard questions. Is that an environment that's, maybe I need to be somewhere else. Maybe I need to look for that next assignment, or maybe I need to look for that next opportunity.
Yeah.
Because it's, I'm sure there's empirical data that will support the fact that, staying in a negative environment like that is definitely not going to be helpful to you.
Okay.
Hey, Otis, just real quick, I was going to ask if we were able to get any engagements in. I just got a couple notes that folks weren't able to get in.
People, so that link that I provided to you, it's only for us as the broadcast team, but anybody can. Yes, that's just for us only. But if anyone wants to jump in on the discussion, they can go to the live discussion area that we've got going on. So so allow folks to jump in on the discussion via the link that I'm gonna do right now. I'm gonna copy and send it over to you as far as an inbox. And
cool.
Then you can share that away on your page and allow folks to, come on and just join in on the discussion that we've got going on. But I'd like to let's add on some of the comments that we've got going on. And I apologize about the video and audio thing going on today, y'all. Camera work is going a little bonkers, but we are going to improve this issue that's going on. Okay, so
it did look really great when we prepped this.
It did, and it worked.
The color wheel was hot.
So yeah, we had videos, as y'all normally know how I do things. I've got videos, I've got lights. I look fancy, but not today. Not today. But we are going to make it happen. So let me go ahead and add some of the comments that's already been posted as far as our discussion. And so let's see. Wait, hold on. They're just really some Q&A stuff. Someone saying, hey, you had an echo going. Yeah. Someone said, hey, they're watching from the Caribbean. Hey, I appreciate Marva Orr, you taking it out and enjoying the show. And hi, Ebony. How you doing? Thank you for... She's actually one of my my mentors, and she's absolutely awesome. She helped me get to where I'm at today. So, I just wanted to continue, I guess, the conversation that we've got going on. And, I appreciate everyone checking out our discussion. I appreciate everyone doing that. But I want y'all to send in some questions that Mr. Townsend and I can put on the page, and I'm sure it's some questions that folks have that they don't want to ask. So go ahead and feel free to ask those questions. But let's talk a little bit about the inclination to action in absence of orders attack. So what exactly does that mean? Because when I read that what that means to me is, hey, if you see something that needs to be done, if you see that something needs to be fixed, don't wait until a leader tells you to go and fix it or get it done. Be an independent thinker and freaking conquer that objective. What does it mean to you, though?
Yeah, no, that's exactly, Otis, I think you've captured the complete intent of that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
um, coming up over the years, I had always heard, it was always used, it was always, hey, get out there and make things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Really be a doer uh, for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, I was doing some background research and looking for, famous dead guy quotes. Um,
Oh my God.
and uh, one of the things that I had searched was, who had said that, and I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't really find it other than to say that it had been pulled out of doctrine or some nonsense like that. And
Mm-hmm.
there was a couple of allusions to that apparently Rommel had at one point made a comment similar following the Battle of Tobruk. Said I would be rather more happy had he given me one more division, and this was after Hitler made him a field marshal. And in the absence of orders, go find something and kill it. Sweat saves blood, blood saves lives, and brains save both. So
Mm-hmm.
you know, uh, just an interesting comment. I mean, certainly, as if you look back to World War II, and Erwin Rommel was certainly an accomplished armor combat combined arms leader.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would submit that's probably a loose connotation to what he said. But the bottom line is, if when you see something that's not been done and or needs to be done, just just taking action, handling it, and moving along. Because if you don't take care of it, then what you've done is by overlooking that,
Yeah.
you've created a uh, a new standard that is not something that you would expect. You know, I mean, it can be from the ridiculous to the sublime. Whether it's, I'm picking up a piece of paper on the way to, the copy machine that fell on the floor, whatever. But
Ah.
it carries over into everything else. I'm going to make, oh, that's not my job. Somebody else needs to do it. It's about
Yeah.
the, it's the ultimate welfare, care, and feeding of that organization. And, you know, just make it happen. Take care of it as you move through. It's just,
So,
you do it in stride.
and I guess I'm taking the devil's advocate point of view because obviously, yes, we're gonna want to pick up the slack, be a glue guy or gal. You want to be that person to be that backup, to be that person to support others when they're falling short, or support your environment when it's falling short. But sometimes people become over fatigued by that. Some people may just, see that as, man, they're just using the hell out of me. Why should I be that person to always have people's backs? But when it comes time for celebrating those that are, doing the hard work, that person doesn't receive any of the not even a shout out, not even an accolade. I mean, how is someone supposed to get over that?
Mm, yeah. Um, yeah. Good question. Um, some do and some don't, um,
Yeah.
but I think the best, I think that comes back to the internal drive. Now, the internal drive can get worn down, when you're
Mm-hmm.
not getting that feedback. And we certainly, you shouldn't be in the business of, well, I've got to receive an accolade. I need
Uh-huh.
to, I need that,
Uh-huh. I agree.
that positive reinforcement. Um, but it kind of becomes that internal driver to, I know that what I have done and taken care of the things that I should have taken care of to the best of my
Mm-hmm.
ability, whatever that happens to be, whatever your role is within the organization. Um, and with that, that's what you can control. And by virtue of
Mm-hmm.
knowing that you control that and you yourself, I think that has to be where people derive their um,
Internal
uh,
drive.
well, internal drive, but um, where they achieve that emotional satisfaction.
Ah, yeah.
Um,
So it's kind of like I don't need a pat on the back, but knowing that gratification of being that person that took care of it when it needed to be taken care of
right.
should be suffice in the feedback that you should get.
Yeah. Because it's going to be noticed. It will be noticed. And yes, and that's, certainly feedback, both positive and negative, constructively, um,
Hmm.
is going to um, is going to improve those situations. I mean, and that's, and that kind of leads into that, emotional intelligence aspect of, you know, knowing and understanding um, those with whom you work, those with whom you lead or are led by. What are their
Hmm.
motivations? So,
Uh-huh.
um, if their motivation is um, that accolade, um, or if it's that act of service, or whatever, whatever that motivational factor might be, knowing and
Hmm.
understanding um, those that are in your sphere and influencing them the way they want to be influenced. So if someone needs that accolade, um, you know, they don't cost anything. Hey, that was a great job. Didn't cost you anything. You know,
Yeah.
5 minute phone call. Hey, just want to tell you that was really awesome. Really appreciate what you're doing. What's what's working well for you? What's not working well? Or an email.
Yeah.
Hey, I saw you in the hallway. Meant to stop. Just it doesn't cost anything to do
Hmm.
that, to make a point of impact for someone. And it doesn't need to be, unless, of course you can share that too. Hey,
Yeah.
I want everybody to know you did a really great job. I mean, there's both aspects, that private, you know, certainly if one of your cohorts is an introvert, and you
Yeah.
just put them on blast and said, man, that's awesome. That's,
Yeah.
that can throw them into a tailspin. But certainly, that's a good kind of uncomfortable. You can
Hmm.
apologize to them later. And certainly the extroverts, are going to want that feedback and that potential gratification. So those are all just parts and pieces of knowing those with whom you work and or lead, or whoever shows up in that sphere of, of your influence. So
Got it. You know, being in a position of leadership, you're allowed the privilege in, well, I would say you're allowed the opportunity to learn many people's motivations. But people's motivations, you've got to be multilingual, I should say, in being able to speak their appreciation language. But this is to the point that I was trying to bring up. Have you ever
mm,
heard of love language before?
yeah, yeah,
There's the
I
five
believe
love
there's five.
languages. Yes, five. So you've got physical, you've got gifts, you've got acts of service,
Service.
you've got time spent with one person, and I don't know what the fifth one is, whatever it is. But people
Actually, I think
have,
it's touch.
and yeah, and touch, all right? So, a handshake could be a love language. A
Right.
handshake could also be an appreciation language. Now, let's move the word love and put it to appreciation. Some people may be gratified or
Hmm.
appreciative of their supervisors showing their appreciation by a handshake or
Hmm.
a gift presentation or a word of acknowledgement or multiple different ways. And to add to your point that you previously said, different leaders need to learn the people that they're leading and learn to speak their appreciation language. That's just my point of view on that.
Right. Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about a know-it-all. I know you brought up that point on
Yeah.
some of the things that you want to talk about. Some people relish being a know-it-all. Why should they be penalized for being a know-it-all? Can that person be a subject matter expert that other people can look up to? What if
Sure.
that's their means of motivation? Let's kind of venture around that terminology of know-it-all. But prior to actually jumping in there, let's go ahead and check out some of the comments that's coming in. And we've got one from Mr. Arturo P. Diaz. He said, I'll follow Lieutenant Colonel Townsend anywhere. Do you know Mr. Diaz?
Yes, I sure do. Yeah. Um,
Okay.
yeah, great American. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Your face turned kind of rosy. I'm thinking good memories, good energy that you just felt from reading those words.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, so I don't think you do anything as long as just over a quarter of a century
Yeah,
uh, and not have a lot of good memories.
got you.
And Mr. Diaz is just one of the many in a very recent assignment, and he's an amazing leader in his own right. So
Got you. Got you.
yeah. Matter of
That
fact, I
kind
think
of
he's up at Norwich right now or
Oh,
nearby. I
okay,
can't
okay.
recall.
So
But
here's the funny thing. This kind of connects with what Mr. Diaz just said with what I was just talking about. Your language of appreciation. That's a word of affirmation right there. And that's something that made you feel good as a leader. And so other leaders just need to be mindful of all these different things. But let's go into what I just brought up before about the know-it-all. Can you talk to us about that?
yeah. Well, I think if most of us, if you've been around for a minute or two, you've met someone who is very sure of themselves and is very willing to let you know that they
Mm-hmm.
are in fact a know-it-all and or the smartest person in the room. Um, and I'll just again, it kind of goes back to sphere of influence and you know how does that how does that emotional intelligence uh, translate to everybody else uh, in that organization, in that
Mm-hmm.
meeting. Um, it, it has, in my opinion, it has the tendency to stifle everything.
Mm.
Um,
How
you
so?
know, well, if what's the purpose of the meeting? If you know it all and you shut down all uh, intellectual discourse
Mm-hmm.
or courses of action that you might undertake to solve a particular problem, then
Mm-hmm.
there's no need for a staff. There's no need for a larger team or set of divisions that manage,
Mm-hmm.
you know, uh, marketing, sales, service. Excuse me. What's the point? I mean, you, they might be an effective organization, but they're not going to be. I don't think they'll achieve an optimal um, set of effectiveness measures because they're not leveraging or they're not harnessing the power of the team around them. Um, because if if I was going to do if I was going to solve a medical logistics problem, AJ
Mm-hmm.
Diaz would be one of the first guys I would call. I know a little bit about that
Mm-hmm.
medical logistics. It's stuff. Logistics is stuff. Getting it to and from places, acquiring it, um, having it on hand, strategically locating it. But if I was going to start that conversation, I'm going to start with somebody who's down in that particular topic, and I'm going to let them. Um, again, I'm going to allow them to build the solution
Mm-hmm.
because again, certainly we as leaders develop and you move through the hierarchy of any organization, um, you're going to have more experience. But again, you're not going to necessarily have all the knowledge, especially technology wise, because it moves so fast,
Yeah.
certainly now. So I would want to leverage youth um, and
Why
different
youth?
perspectives.
Why youth? Why is that important?
Well, I say youth because of certainly their inclination to technology, and
Yes.
potentially seeking out new and unique ways to look, because they're going to perceive problems in a different perspective.
Yes.
um, and it's just and that's in large part timing. um, you know, someone that, you know, I mean, gosh, the progression of musical styles and types of media formats.
Yes.
Today's, you know, high schooler probably isn't familiar with a CD at all. They don't, you know,
Yeah.
a tangible media format, like an 8-track cassette tape or
Hmm.
a record album, you know, that's quite novel. However, everything is virtual. Everything is virtual. You can pull
Yeah.
it out of, there's an app for that. There's, it's in the cloud, so many of, software as a solution type
Hmm.
of approaches to problems. They are going to have a different and unique perspective in how to tackle that problem. So that's why I say, don't be the know-it-all, um, because you just, by being that person, you crush initiative and you
Yeah.
crush creativity. The fastest way to get people to stop is to, um, you know, poo-poo that idea,
Yeah.
um, take it away from them, talk it down, um, rather than maybe let it play out. Give it the
It's
opportunity. If you've been doing something a particular way for a set amount of time,
yeah.
bring in new perspectives. I, I, I certainly did that, as a battalion commander. I would have um, an operations officer, um, for about a year or so,
Hmm.
and I was always very. I wanted to give them the latitude to do, to bring their perspectives and their intuition to the table,
Hmm.
um, and made sure that they'd walk right down the hall, discuss anything they wanted to, anytime they wanted to. Um, but I was giving them the latitude to do that because we had done certain things for 12 months. Well, guess what? Some of these things were successful. Let's try something different. Let's see
Yeah.
how these things work. Just because it worked for that period of 12 months doesn't mean it's going to work for the next 12 months, whatever the case may
Yeah.
be. Because the situations change
Got
all
it.
the time.
And what's interesting, and I've got a question that's been asked in the comment section, but I saw that there was a void in the communication spectrum regarding officers and enlisted, and also LDP that officers can receive. I myself, I'm a prior officer myself, and I didn't really get much LDP growing through my time as a junior officer. So I said, okay, let's use social media. We're all going to be doing it via live streaming. So let's go ahead and just use this forum. And it has turned into something that
Yeah.
has bore a lot of positive fruit. So, you see the opportunity to use some of your youthful technology skills to present
Yeah.
new ideas that a lot of folks that are appreciative of it and are using. So, just want to give a shout out to those who've embraced it as well.
Yeah.
But here's a question that's coming in. It comes from Ebony. Hey, Ebony, how you doing? She said, "How do you best motivate intellectual discourse with leaders who either don't feel empowered to engage or tend to wait to be directed to take action?" That's a good question.
Wow, that's a great question.
Hmm.
I don't know that I'm fully equipped to even answer that. Uh, Gosh, that is, sometimes, because I've certainly run into it myself
Mm-hmm.
with um, kind of, well, passive aggressive leaders, to be sure.
Ooh.
Um,
Mm.
you know, it can, especially if it's outside their comfort zone. Sometimes they might be uh, intimidated
Mm-hmm.
by someone as brilliant as Ebony is, because of her background and her
Yep.
expertise.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I think it's one of those cases where if you can make it their idea, and uh, couch it in terms, or potentially even lead them to that particular solution,
Mm-hmm.
as an option. Um, I mean, it is a difficult challenge, and I'll be quite honest. Uh, I had a leader that I, it was exceptionally difficult for me to turn um, my ideas into his. It just, and things where we thought were very obvious opportunities that we could leverage for the good of the organization, we just couldn't get there. And
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes you're just not going to get there. I think is quite, and I think that's one of those um, learning opportunities that becomes, we have up, two learning opportunities: how to and how not to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we're going to pick that up from those types of leaders, and gosh, you do the best you can. You do it as tactfully as you can. You do it as persuasively as you can. Um, but at the end of the day, they may just not go for it. Um,
Got you.
and
Got you.
then, maybe sometimes you build. Um, I wouldn't necessarily say outside, but you build a broad base of consensus
Mm-hmm.
um, amongst peers, and there's a little bit of strength in numbers, and potentially that's a way to get it into the mainstream and into the executable idea category.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a great question, and it's a challenge, a very, very difficult challenge.
It's a challenge that we should embrace. How do I get this person to take the lead on something? That is an absolute good question, Ebony. And just as a follow up to her question, she said, "Certainly not brilliant, but I appreciate the nod. Always striving." Shout out to you, Ebony. Shout out to her. And I've got a comment coming in, and I saw it it was in a separate group. It's from, she was actually in ROTC with me at my college. Sakara, her name is. She's now a dietitian student here at Fort Sam. So shout out to her. And she said,
Okay.
"This is very good way to encourage leaders to think critically." That very good comment. Thank you, Sakara.
Yeah.
Shout out to you. But let's go into, and I guess this could be a follow up to the know it all question. But you spoke on possessing emotional intelligence, empathy, shut up and listen. Some of us, some of us may not necessarily want to be empathetic. I'm like, I am tired of having to, you know, be thinking of other people's situations. I've got my own going on. Why should I put myself in another person's shoes? I am enjoying being Mr. Sunshine, and I am shining. Why should I slow down and try to be empathetic for someone else? What
Well,
is what's the
yeah,
word that you got to share for that?
yeah. Um, well, I think, I mean, the whole purpose of this conversation is about leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So if that is a take, or a position that somebody wants to take, then I think they've got to reevaluate whether or not they really truly want to be a leader. Because if you're not committed to uh, caring about others, um, then I would submit that your ability to lead is going to be gravely compromised.
Yes.
Because, I mean, from our respective environments, um, leaders leaders give.
Mm-hmm.
They have to give trust. They have to give guidance. Whether we want to or not, we are responsible for uh, the morale, the welfare, the health and welfare of those under our charge,
Yes.
regardless of whether you have been trained or not trained, or think you have or have not been trained. It's
Mm-hmm.
still your responsibility. So,
Okay.
not having that, uh, you know, sure, everybody has their moments. If it's, everybody has an off day, that's okay. Um, but if not caring about others is your modus operandi, then I think you've got to do some soul searching and potentially a reevaluation of what your what your pursuits really are. You
Okay.
know,
And I appreciate you being able to counter my devil's advocate point of view. But I want to hear also, you know, regarding being empathetic. How do you show empathy? In what ways have you learned through your years to show that empathy?
well, there's no mystery that we have two ears and one mouth, and I'm
Yes.
certainly not going to uh, pretend that I'm an expert at that. Um, I
Mm-hmm.
think certainly my wife would potentially disagree a number of times. Um, but, you know, sometimes it's best just to ask, um, of your subordinates, of your peers, of your seniors, those open-ended fact-finding questions so that you can, potentially learn more about them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and by virtue of listening and actively listening, I think we overuse the term actively listening, um, but through some of the coaching courses that I've taken, that active listening is tuning out everything. The phone is off. You're not paying attention to any of the external goings on. You are
Mm-hmm.
solely focused on whomever is in front of you, whomever is doing the speaking, such that, and you're not worried about or thinking about the response um, to whatever they're saying. Stop
Mm-hmm.
thinking about what your comeback is going to be. Be in the moment with that person so that you, um, I wouldn't say internalize, but you truly get a grasp of what they're saying. And then, even to the point where you potentially repeat it back to them to give them the opportunity, number one, that you were in fact listening and you were listening well. And you're also indicating that you want to make sure that you got it right, that that's
Got it.
where they actually are. And it potentially leads to either a clarification or a thumbs up. Yes, hey, that's exactly what I meant. Or,
Mm-hmm.
well, maybe I don't really mean it that way. Here's what I actually meant. So you've uncovered what it truly means to them, whatever it is, whatever that aspect is. Um, you might not be, you might not have sympathy because you haven't experienced whatever that is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But the simple act of understanding that whether you know about the challenge that they're facing, just that it's a challenge to whatever degree it is for that individual,
Mm-hmm.
that challenge is significant. It's made an impact to them, and they've gone so far as to share it with you. Another indicator of trust, because that
Trust.
trust, you
Yes.
just built that bridge both ways to them. You gave
Yeah.
it to them. They gave it to you by sharing it. You sent it back to them in the confirmation of it or the clarification. Um, and so that's a way that it's built.
Excellent. Excellent. So we've got a comment coming in. It's from Miss Ebony Ivy Harris. She said, "My old battalion commander, ready to roll." I hit,
Let's
sir. I'll tell
let's
you what.
roll.
That is this is an indication of the legacy that you've left, where people are checking in, people have fond memories, and you, in turn, you almost light up on the screen reading some of these comments
Yeah,
of soldiers that were under your leadership at one time. So
yeah.
let's talk a little bit about the ability to communicate effectively. Now, style and level. What do you mean by that?
Um, well, style and level is in the way I look at it is knowing and understanding how you communicate in particular, what your particular style is. And that goes to personality. That goes to,
Mm-hmm.
are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? Are you a functional introvert? There's all
Mm-hmm.
kinds of, categories there. Um, how do you present? How do you show up in a particular environment? Some people, um, are better extemporaneous communicators. Um, some need to be prepared. Some do well in meetings. Some don't do well in meetings. Some can present. Some can't present. All those. It's kind of like test takers. There's a
Mm-hmm.
million and one ways to do that. So it's knowing how you communicate, but it's also knowing um, who your receivers are,
Mm-hmm.
who your audience is. It's nothing. It's not earth shattering. Um, and I know it's a constant challenge for me to uh, make sure that I'm communicating correctly. I have a tendency to be a contextualizer. I want to
What does
provide
that mean?
context. I want to provide context. I want to have a conversation with you. Um, and it could be long winded. And I hope that neither of my daughters show up on here and go, yeah, he's definitely long winded. Um, so, yeah, I think so. That's what I mean is how do you communicate and how do others receive that communication? So, um, and then, what level are you communicating on?
Yeah.
Um, I think it's important to keep the communication at a level that everybody understands. Um, you don't have to show off, you know, your book learning with
Mm-hmm.
25-cent words when a 5-cent word will do uh, the very same job.
Can
Sometimes
I ask a question?
yeah,
Let me ask a question.
you're running the show. Yes.
Yeah, I definitely got a question on this. So you said communication should be, something that both the receiver and the sender is well versed in. They have at least a mutual understanding of, obviously, communication lines should always be open, but unfortunately, those who are perceived to be leaders or are in leadership positions may not necessarily want to allow you to communicate with them as freely and openly as you may want to. And this kind of goes with the second part. I guess the next question that we'll be coming up with, where it says the two-phase conversation with your boss. Should you have that intellectual knife fight, or should you shut up and color? And I am guessing from that statement, it means should I have this communication with this leader of mine to show them and maybe understand from them, your point of view, sir or ma'am, may not necessarily be correct. This is a better way of how we should do things, or should I just say, hey, they're the boss, I should be quiet and let me just follow with my orders?
All right. So, like as I indicated when we started, many of these things have come from other leaders that I've had the opportunity to work with throughout my career,
Mm-hmm.
and um, uh, retired one-star Billy Don Ferris uh, gave, was, is responsible for the two-phase conversation, and that's the intellectual knife fight. So basically, he said there are two phases to every conversation. The first phase is the intellectual knife fight, and that's where it's open. And this is where that trust comes into play, and not being the smartest guy in the room, where you're taking all of that feedback, you're taking all of the inputs, and you're kind of, it's kind of a brain, a jam session, if you will. But there comes a point where the boss gets a vote. They've taken in all of the inputs. They've looked at all the data. They've listened to key leaders in their formation, and the boss has made a decision. And it's at that point you've just gone into phase two. And when you go into phase two, that's where it's shut up and color. And that's not derogatory. If anything, it's more, hey, got it, boss. We had an intellectual disagreement. I understand completely, and we're going to go execute exactly what you want. And you simply move out and handle your business. And that's one of those important. And the important thing is not to say, and this applies anywhere. Well, the boss just said we've gotta. No, it's what the led need to hear is, here's what we're doing. This is how it's going to go. That's what they need to hear from you. It doesn't need to be, well, the boss said.
Yes.
Because what you're doing is, by virtue of the statement, you're undercutting what the boss said, because you're indicating to your subordinates that you disagree.
Yes.
And that's not easy, especially if it's a very passionate conversation. Very passionate.
That kind of goes anti one of the earlier points that you brought up, where you're not taking the lead or the initiative to execute an issue that you see in front of you. So, you're kind of saying, okay, I am only going about with this mission, and I am only going about taking care of this task that my supervisor, whether military or civilian, wants done. I'm not doing it because I want to. I'm doing it because I'm being told to. And I think that's the separator of what a leader is versus someone who's just following orders.
Yeah. So let me make sure where do you think the shut up and color component clashes with doing the right thing, whether anybody's watching?
No. What I'm saying is, doing the right thing, whether anyone is watching or not, should be the standard. The earlier, the shut up and color, that may merge from, okay, your boss actually having that conversation, and as you said, okay, you and your boss may disagree, and you've decided that, okay, I'm just going to follow what my boss is saying. I agree with that as well. My issue that I'm seeing here, unfortunately, is some of us may not necessarily even want to take that initiative to even get to that level of shut up and color. They're executing, almost kind of undercutting and connivingly saying, yeah, I'm just doing this because my boss wants to do it.
Well, sure. And it does happen. It happens throughout. It happens everywhere. It's not unusual or sequestered to business or the military or whatever. Those people who make up their own mind, we have a term that we've used, and we call it an insurgency.
Yep.
And that's not helpful. That kind of goes back to that competition.
Yes. Absolutely.
It goes back to
Maybe they're a know-it-all and they don't want to
right.
freaking execute the
Sure.
mission that's been given in
Right.
front of them.
Well, it can be a whole host of things, and
Correct.
it's um, I think what's important to know is that the potential for insurgencies exists,
Mm-hmm.
and they do exist. They may not exist now. They may grow in the future. They may exist, and they may, all of a sudden get on board. But those become a leadership engagement thing, and it's knowing who's on board and who's not on board. They
Mm-hmm.
might You might be able to bring them around, um, but also know that you do what your pay grade can handle.
How can you tell when someone is not on the team? And how do you I don't want to say how do you make them on the team, but that person has already decided that they're not on the team. How do you
Mm.
identify and then remove them? But before we get into
Yeah.
that question, I've got a comment. And hey, Arturo, I appreciate the comment, but my video camera is giving me some issues today. So we're just doing it with the blinking icon on the left. And Mr. He can vouch that it actually worked before. So please forgive me
Yeah.
for this
AJ,
mishap.
it did work in rehearsal. I can vouch for that.
It worked before, but let's go back to my question. How do you identify, how do we remove, how do we quelch those insurgents?
I I think you um, through direct engagement. Quite frankly, I think you'll
Mm-hmm.
know who they are by body language alone.
Mm-hmm.
I'd submit probably the preponderance of people will give away whether or not they believe it or they're on board through body language um, alone, if not comments and or uh, after actions. If they're not following
Yeah.
through, you're going to see whether or not the measures of effectiveness work,
Mm-hmm.
or your key performance indicators are, they're on or they're not.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, again, when I say engagement, that's as much as um, it's not just putting a set of ideas out there or just simply telling people to execute. Um, we as leaders also have that responsibility to follow back up with them, um, to assess how the is process being made.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so engaging with the people who are executing um, that task at all levels, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
the managers, um, the analysts, and you know the people on the ground doing that work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if you're not if you don't have a sense of, if you don't have touch points throughout that your organization, then it's going to be real difficult to do that. So you got to, I've had many leaders call it, I'm going to check the dipstick, like you're going to check the oil in your car. You're going to pull out the dipstick and you're going to look at it. And you're going to say, okay, well, it looks like this is working,
Yeah.
or it's not.
Yeah.
Um, and then it's simply a series of, open-ended fact-finding questions. So what would you do differently? What about
Yeah.
this? You might have 80% of it right, and it just needs some tweaks, or you might need to back up and go another direction. But I think without those engagements, um, and your trust, trust. Um, are you giving that trust to those subordinates, and even those that are insurgents? You still got to give them that trust, that you have confidence in their faith and ability to execute what you've asked them to do, and
Excellent.
you expect that to
Mm-hmm.
go down. So
So we've got two comments coming in, and let's check them out. So we've got one from Miss Connie Cadets. She said, "Get to the root of the problem. What is their fear?" I
Yeah,
appreciate the comment, Miss
that's
Connie.
good, Connie.
We've got another one from Mr. Wesley Drake. Says, "You can always circle back to the decision maker after the shut up in color to
Yeah,
reiterate your concerns with the decision. The only time you should continue to press with your intellectual knife fight depends on the impact to the organization and the people." I fully agree with that. What do you think
yeah,
about that?
that's a great point. And Wesley Drake is an exceptional leader in his own right, and I would submit, Otis, you probably ought to drag him on here. Um, no, he is such a wealth of knowledge,
Hmm.
and he makes a good point. So there are also ways to approach leaders. I can take you back to, you know, a passive aggressive leader that um, I waited until, you know, kind of the smoke had cleared, and I had an opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation with that leader, um,
Hmm.
and that's an opportunity to Connie's point, figure out what they're fearful of, if that's in fact what it is, what's holding them back,
Hmm.
or having that, um, some might say, a come to Jesus meeting, where
Hmm.
you kind of lay it on the line because you are behind closed doors. You've established trust with that individual, um, and or potentially you've set the groundwork or the conditions to have this conversation. You've just never had it. You know,
Yeah.
Hey boss, if I ever disagree with you, I want to know that I can come to you and we can have a conversation if it's
Mm.
just you and I. Um, and I don't, and hopefully you don't have to use that very often,
Yeah.
or certainly irregularly. But no, Brother Drake's got a great point. Based on the potential impacts and the outcomes,
Yeah.
um, because if it boils down to life, limb, or eyesight, um, then that's a different set of circumstances, and that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
And he's absolutely right. That intellectual knife fight, it may need to continue, and it may need to
Yeah.
continue in other ways, and that could be even out, you know outside the outside normal channels. So
Excellent. Well, as far as being able to continue, I wish we could continue our conversation a whole lot longer. You like that transition there, though, right? I know you
nicely
appreciated it.
done,
But I wanted to
nicely done.
say, Mr. Townsend, I really appreciate you coming and just talking with me, even though my video stopped. We kept it rolling.
Yeah, no, it's all
And
good. No, I'm really appreciative for the opportunity to do this, and I think what you're doing and the platform is, I think it's really exceptional, and I hope it continues to gain steam. I think
hmm
it's I think it's very, very cool. I hope it's been informative. I've enjoyed it very much.
It has been. I think it has been. I think those who've checked out our discussion, those who've left comments and questions, they've enjoyed it. So, I will, of course, do this a whole lot more. If you'd like to come on and talk with us some more, the invite is out there for you. You are invited to come back again. But I wanted to say just thank you for everything today.
No, pleasure was all mine. I really appreciate it. I hope we've had the opportunity to give something back to those that follow along behind us, and certainly even ahead of us. So
Hmm.
very
Absolutely.
cool.
All right, sir.
Thanks so much.
Well, you,
I
you
appreciate it.
take it easy.
All right. Bye
Hang
bye.
out, hang out in the broadcast room. I'll talk with you a little bit afterwards.
Okay, sure.
All right. So we just had our discussion there with Mr. Townsend. I really appreciated the discussion. He kind of brought things in full circle with me. I will admit, I am sometimes a very strong-headed type A personality when it comes to wanting to get my point across and getting stuff done, especially even in my line of work. And this is something that I've got to now look into myself and wonder, hey, am I, am I a good coworker? I'm thinking about it now. I think I may have, hurt myself and hurt my overall job's mission oftentimes. And I'm working public affairs. And this is something that I've got to critically now look upon myself and figure out how can I improve my work environment where everyone is welcomed, everyone is respected, and everyone has an opportunity to at least share their points of views. And that's just something that I want to implore onto those that's checking out the discussion today. But as I always say in parting, take care of yourself, take care of others, and take care of your family. Bye now.